Hi, Danielle. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
All right, everyone. Today I am talking to Danyale Washington, parent coach from Sweet Peace Solutions. Danielle and I met a while ago, actually, via my Facebook group, and we've been in touch here and there. And then this interview opportunity came up, and she was like, "Yes, count me in." And I was a parent coach before what I'm doing now, so I love what Danielle does and the impact that it can create in families. And so that's why I invited her on to share her wisdom with us today. So Danielle, I would love it if you could. You've been in business a couple years now, right? 2 years.
hmm
Take us back a little, right? Like, how did
Yeah.
you get to Danielle Washington, parent coach?
Well, it's always been Danyale Washington, like child lover. I have just always loved children and working with children in really any capacity. You could say it runs in my family. My mom had an in-home daycare growing up, so like we've always just been in that caregiver, caretaker role, or just like in that environment. So I went to college for psychology, and my thought was gonna be like a family therapist or something in that realm, or like a child and adolescent therapist, something like that. And I ended up working on campus at the Early Childhood Center, which is like a fancy daycare, obviously, for like the surrounding neighborhoods and like faculty for the school and things like that. So I fell in love with it. I was like, people they pay you to play with children. Like, this is awesome. So I was like, yes, I'm gonna do this. So I did that. I ended up babysitting for some of the families that I really connected with, or the children I really connected with. And then that like grew and like flourished into a beautiful nanny career that I took my children with on and off for 7+ years. And then the pandemic hit, which is, I mean, if you talk to anyone for the last like 5 years, it's kind of been like the big catalyst, right? Of like switching roles or really like re-examining where you want to be and where you want to go. Prior to that, I had been thinking about like, well, nanny, as much as I love it, is not my long-term goal. I don't want to nanny until I'm 50 or 60, so what was that going to look like? So the pandemic kind of pushed me to be like, okay, Danielle, like this is kind of the time because the nanny world, like much of everything in the world kind of flipped on its head. And I was like, yeah, it's no longer suitable for what my family needs, what I need. And I was kind of looking for a new outlet. So I remember this day vividly. I was sitting in the office of our home in Portage Park, and my son was at school, my daughter was napping, and I was just kind of like, what am I gonna do? Like, this is not like I'm not fulfilled anymore. I want to do more. I want what I'm doing, but like more, like I really love helping others. And I took out my phone to start like writing notes of like, what do I do as a nanny and as a caregiver, and what I've done throughout my career so far, and how can I incorporate this into a business. And that's how Sweet Pea Solutions was born. I kind of just compartmentalized and categorized things that I did throughout my career, which is help with like behavior support, sleep support, potty training, and like new parent transitions and things like that. So I kind of put those into categories and put it into coaching. And that's how, before I knew parent coaching was a thing. So it's kind of like, it was like a bittersweet feeling of like, I thought I like created this cool new like area and field, and I was like, oh no, it actually exists already, which was kind of nice to know that like, okay, I wasn't crazy for this idea. Like
Yeah.
it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're touching on a really important point here, right? Like that fine balance between being unique, right? Being really unique and also tapping completely into the things that we love and doing without being something that's so far out that the market has no idea what we're doing, right? Like to make sure that, because I think in business, sometimes we come up with these amazing original ideas, but one of the feedbacks that I've gotten from coaches along the way as well is if no one else is doing it, right? It's not that it's impossible. It's just a lot harder to get started and established because people won't know what it is that you
hmm
do, right? So the fact that when you started this and you're like, oh, parent coaching is a thing and really cool that this is, and it grew because a few years ago when I was doing it as well, like it was barely known. And now you've got all these certification programs and all of this stuff going on, but that wasn't around a few years ago. Right. So it's really interesting as well. And like you said, like the pandemic has been a catalyst. I think kind of like motherhood for a lot of us, right? Like when you became a mom, right? Deciding like, wait, what is it that I want to do, and how do I want to live my life with my kids as a part of it, but also like the pandemic, how that has influenced how we're doing life and business, right? Like just the fact that we are here right now, for example, right? You're in the States, I'm here in Costa Rica, and we're just having conversation and having an interview, which like a few years ago, I mean, I feel like it's exploded like potential, but it's also had a huge impact on like physical businesses, for example. So if you were to say where is your main focus right now then, right? Because you named a whole bunch of different topics that you do, right? Like potty training, like first time parents, helping them come with it. What is your favorite thing, or what is the thing that you do the most actually with your parent coaching?
Oh, behavior is my jam. I love everything about behavior and learn. I mean, I'm a psychology major. Like I love learning how the mind works. And I call myself a mindset coach, like parent coach, but a mindset coach, a parenting mindset coach, because I do believe the way that we show up, right, in just our everyday lives, that includes parenting, it has a direct impact on the way that people show up for us, or
Yeah.
to, like represent themselves to us, but then also to others, right? Especially as it relates to parenting our children, because we are the foundation for a lot of how they view the world. So it's really important that we are mindful of like how we are showing up for that, showing up for them, and showing up for ourselves, because they're taking all of that in.
Yeah. And so mindfulness, I love mindfulness, right? Like that's like one of the, I think the cornerstones of pretty much anything that you're starting with in life, like the awareness, right? Consciousness is of own behaviors, your own mindset. I mean, mindset, they say in anything, right? Like in business as well, it's like 80%, the skills like 20%. So in parenting, you could actually say the same thing, I'm sure, right? Like your mindset, how you approach it, how you go into the day with your kids, how you handle conflict, how you handle unwanted behaviors, right? Because behavior is just behavior. How you handle all that is a reflection of your mindset, right?
Mhm.
So when you're starting with people, like, I'm just curious, right? Like, how do you start encouraging people to be self-reflective, right? To start being aware of those. I mean, we see it, right? Immediately.
Yeah,
Like you're out on the
yeah,
street and you see someone who's like, if you do that one more time, we're going home. Right. Like when
yeah,
I started, I was like, oh God, I see that everywhere.
yeah,
So
yeah.
how do we start creating that? Like, I'm curious, right? How do you start getting people
Yeah,
there?
well, yeah, the first thing that we do, and I'm very transparent about the kind of coach that I am. I am not a band-aid coach. We're not here to fix, I'm not a fixer. We're not here to fix your children because they're not broken, or fix
Yeah.
you. We're here to figure out skills, or hone skills,
Yeah.
or change skills so that we can handle things that are the normal part of parenting, right? But we start with tracking. Like I'm very big on tracking not only like the behavior, so you can kind of see what's going on, because when you're in the eye of the storm, you're kind of like, these are all unrelated, like I don't know what is the catalyst. So when you kind of start to track and see that, like, oh, it's kind of like when I set a demand, this is when this happens. When when there's not enough time to do X, Y, and Z, this is when this happens. So like kind of just letting them see like the full picture.
Yeah.
When they're putting it down, they're like, oh my God, like I didn't notice that this is one of like this is a trigger. I didn't even think that that was a trigger. I
Yeah.
thought it was just whatever. And then also we talk about triggers. I don't have them just, you're not just tracking your child, you're tracking yourself. Like, what are the reactions I want you to think about the reactions you're giving. I want you to think about the consequences that you give them. And if you don't have anything in the consequence, or like in the expectations, then what does that say, right? Because
Yeah.
if we don't have those, then they don't know what's going on either. So it just helps get the bigger picture and take us out of
Yeah. Yeah.
the funk or the
No,
smoke,
I love
the
it. I love it
smoke.
because you're
Yeah.
you're speaking my language, right? Like this is so huge research nerd here, right? So I have a bachelor in psychology too, but I went on to do a master's degree, and that's all about like, numbers and statistics, but also I did qualitative research. But you look for patterns and you look for trends, and then exactly that, like get people out of their head, just get them to start putting on paper like what is happening. That I love that because it's so clear. You can't really like if you're like, oh, my child has tantrums at this and this moment of the day. Could that be right before meal times and they could be getting hangry, right? Like those sort of things that like a lot of us just don't stop, like because let's face it, like a lot of our life even now, and especially I think now things are opening up after COVID, right? We're back into that like go go go, everything has to happen on time frame. I'm sure because you mentioned this as well, right? Anytime I have time pressure, that's like when I get the most resistance and like things seem to like move at the speed of molasses. But exactly that, like noticing moments in time, how am I triggered, how are my kids triggered, like that, just the literal, and I want this as a tip because this is a tip for like anyone in any different kinds of business. Like if you start noting things for yourself, right? Like this can be on a confidence level, this can be also on your business progress, any type of business, right? If you start noting like the key factors, all of a sudden it opens up all this awareness, right? Because if you're like, oh, I'm fighting with my kids all the time, and then you note it, you're like, okay, well, it's once a day and it happens to be at the moment where we're leaving the house for the day. Okay, maybe it's not that bad. And then it opens up possibilities. Because I think that's what you're creating. Like when you create the awareness of the behaviors, then what you're showing is possibility for change. Is that because I'm like filtering that out of what you're saying? Like that's the first step.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, because sometimes we come in at like, well, this is what I want to change. And I like them to kind of put it down because sometimes as you're writing it down, you're like, oh, that's actually not so bad. Or you start to realize we can go through and say, like, oh, that's actually developmentally appropriate. Or, sometimes it just starts to really normalize things where you're like, hey, actually, like my last 3 clients had this exact same thing. But I'm so big. Like I love seeing the kind of like the one that's on almost every single tracking is tantrums, right? Because they're like, oh, they just like throw a fit, they're screeching, they're yelling, they're throwing, they're hitting, and they're like, I want these gone. And I'm like, well, we're not going to get rid of tantrums because you can't, because they're triggered by emotions. Unless you're gonna suck the emotions out of your child, they're gonna happen. Now, and not so much like hitting and yelling all the time, but they're gonna experience big emotions, which is what triggers tantrums,
I'm
which
laughing
triggers
because
the
I have a
other.
2.5-year-old who's like in tantrum phase, and
Yeah.
she's like the sweetest little girl to everyone. And I'm like, I videoed it. I was like, I'm just videoing her laying on the floor, kicking and screaming because she couldn't have a second portion of like, what was it, Rice Krispies, like chocolate Rice Krispies at like 6 o'clock in the evening. And I'm like, yep, this is those moments again. Like I forgot what this was like, those tantrums. But exactly that. Like and maybe because I did this, right? Like we're not trying to take it away. I love, because I want to come back to it, expectations, right? This is something that's so important, whether you have the expectations and they're realistic or non-realistic, or not having any expectations. Like how does that set you up for success also in your parenting, right? Like I can tell you, like my almost 8-year-old, right? I noticed that he's just starting to do things really independently. And I love that. And I noticed that instead of staying and focusing on that, right, and encouraging that independence, that my brain is already moving to, okay, now you got to help with your brother and sister, right? Which is then I checked myself exactly this, because I was like, is that really realistic to expect him at not even 8 years old to be taking that responsibility? And not even is it realistic, because there are kids that do it, obviously, in different cultures, etc. But is that fair to him? He just went through this phase. He's just starting to be independent. Like, wait, now I'm going to saddle him with everyone else, right? So like, I love those moments, those check-in moments. And what I want to know is actually like, because you touched on it, the thing that brings you like the most joy, like when you see a shift in parents.
Oh God, the light bulb moment, like it fills me like no other. Like my husband will say, like, I'll come off a call and I'll be like, gosh, we had like this great breakthrough, or like they said, like, the tips are working, because it's so freeing. I feel like parenting is so heavily talked about, heavily criticized, have like there's so much. So like when you have that moment, like I have yet to have a client that hasn't cried that had to do with like behavior, because it's so heavily
This should be like your
criticized.
tagline. You're like, work with me and you will cry.
You know what I mean? Like I feel like they're just like, I am so overwhelmed. So I
Yeah.
feel like I am failing at this, because that's what society, that's what my family's telling me, that's what my friends are telling me, that's what books are telling me, that's what social media is telling me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, girl, like we have all been there. Like I still have these moments where I'm just like, am I even like, what am I doing? Like, because it's just that's what comes with parenting. And just like seeing all of it released from their body, oh, it's like it gives me goosebumps where I'm just like, I'm
Oh,
glad you got it out. I'm glad that you feel like this is a safe space because I don't think we have many of those where you can really authentically be in your like what you feel and what's been going on and how heavy it can feel some days. So I absolutely love it. It's
so
it's it's like no other.
so the what to summarize it, because I love that. It's the creating the safe space, it's listening and confirming the things that people are already doing well. Right?
Hmm.
Like instead of bringing out that whip and being hard on ourselves because of all of the things that you mentioned, right? Like everything around us, to just recognize all the things that you're already doing well. Yes, of course, there could be room for improvement, but that space, right? That you're already doing a good job. And what I love, like this is what I loved about parent coaching as well. It's just that those parents that come to you and want to work on it, like they've already taken more steps than they realize. Right?
Mm.
Because the very fact that they say, hey, there's something not working in my parenting relation, and it could be that it's just like a mild disturbance, and it could be that they're having a complete meltdown, they don't know what to do anymore, right? Like that overwhelm is real, and we all go through it. Like I still go through it every once in a while. I got three. They say that's a jungle, right? Like they're just all over the place, these kiddos. And my mom's response is, your kids aren't disciplined. And I was like, no, they are. We just have different parenting styles, right? And that as well, like the not judging of other parents, right?
Yes.
So that's what I hear you creating for people is this container, this safe space, someone who's an expert who can guide them on the path, but who's also going to accept and allow them to find their own path within that. Because you can say parent coaching, but you and I both know there are, if you look up parent coaching, you do a little Google search, you get like 10 different ways of parenting, right? Because you've got the authoritarian parenting, you've got conscious parenting, you've got permissive parenting, right? Like you've got the whole and everything in between. There is no black and white.
Hmm.
So what is your take on that? Like if someone comes to you and they're like, I've been looking at this, and what kind of parenting is the best kind of parenting? Do you get that question?
I don't. I think people are just kind of like I think because conscious parenting and gentle parenting, positive parenting, all of those are kind of like just being like beaten over like I mean everywhere. So those are like the big ones they come in are like trying to do this, but it's not working. Like they're still doing X, Y, and Z. And I just like and I think because it's so big and there's so many takes, like you said, parenting is so different and what works for one child might not work for another and things like that that there's so many versions that people are like, I don't know if I'm doing it right.
Yeah.
And it's like, and so they're just kind of figuring out, like, am I even doing it right? It's like, I don't think there's right and wrong, right, per se. It's what works and what doesn't. And that's what I help you sift through. Like, you can take parts of each one. It can be all of one and none of the other. It can be a little bit of this, a little bit of that. It doesn't have to be all encompassing. You
Yeah.
don't have to like every part of parenting, of
No,
that
and
parenting style.
I love that approach because that's in my mind, okay, and this is my very strong opinion on this, that's a sign of a coach, right? We're not telling people what approach to take or what approach is the best. We're helping people find the way, and this is what you're saying you're doing. You're helping them find a way that works for them and their family. And giving them the tools and the mindset, because you know this as well, like just when we think we've got it figured out with our kids, they go into a new phase, right?
Yeah.
So it's about being able to handle whatever is coming your way as well.
Yeah.
So if you're like looking at someone else, right? It doesn't have to be in parenting coaching, but like if you were to give yourself advice, like the you a year ago to get to where you are right now, like what would you
Hmm.
say?
I would say it's just focus. I think we've talked about this. Focus, but give yourself grace.
Yeah.
Because I would be like, I want to help so much, do so much that I was kind of all over the place and very unorganized, very confused at what I do or who I help or because I want to help everyone. But the problem was people were like, well, I don't know what you do because you're rambling off all these things. It's like it's a lot to take in when you're looking for help when someone's kind of like just throwing all this like word vomit at you, it can be like really like, it takes
Yeah.
it takes you back a little bit. So I think just being really clear about what you do, and making sure that that's the biggest thing that you like to do, right? Like making sure you're aligning that thing that like makes you want to get up and do it every morning with what you actually do.
Yeah. So clarity and focus.
Hmm.
Right. And what I'm hearing that you didn't really say explicitly, but it's using your client's language, right? Because
Yeah.
you mentioned you were like word vomit, right? Like I do this, this, and this because we're coming from that level, right? You're talking like psychology degree, years of working with kids, years of working with clients, and we use the language that's up here. And sometimes then we get away from the language that our clients are using, right? Like, and to use the example, because you use this word as well, overwhelm, right?
Hmm.
I hated that word. I hated that word. I found it was like so cliche, but I started analyzing, right? Like all the things that people were saying. And guess what? The word overwhelm just kept coming back, kept coming back, kept coming back. And I was like, fine, I'll use overwhelm. Right. Like, and that's like, I literally went for a walk with someone on the beach and she was like, oh, if someone told me they'd take the overwhelm in my business, like I'd be all there. I was like, crap, still there. Right. Like that check. So I think that that's beautiful that you bring it in, right, for the you a year ago, or the people who are just starting out in business, right? Because that can be like such a scary thing as well, because when we focus, of course, we're leaving other possibilities. And our inclination is to have our fingers in as many pies as possible because that's the most chances,
Hmm.
right? But what it does is, and I'm sure you can attest to this as well, is it dilutes our energy, right?
Yes.
It dilutes our focus. We're all over the place. If we're like, oh, I want to help everyone, well, it's not clear to the people on the other side who we help the most, right? And I know we've talked about this before, right? But I love, so I'm loving hearing it back from you, right? But that focus, right? Focus, clarity, and also what I'm hearing you saying is pick the thing that you like doing the most. And I think that's important too. It's not per se the thing that's going to earn the most money or the thing that is the easiest to do, but the one that's going to get you up. And I love how you said this, like the thing that's going to get you up and going again every single day. Because there are going to be days that are like amazing, and there are going to be days where you're like, why am I doing this?
Hmm.
That are hard, right? And let's face it, those days, I'm speaking for myself, but I'm going to check with you as well, right? Those days are not the days where I'm full on working with my clients, right? Those are the days where it's like nonstop marketing or administration or the stuff that's like less fun to do, right? And then you have those beautiful client stories in the background, right? That's like feeding your soul in a way, right? Like that's like, I am creating this impact in the world with the work I do. So that's why I'm going to keep going with this.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. So behavior is your jam, clarity and focus. Do you have any other like golden tips that you'd like to give to another woman entrepreneur who's starting off?
Definitely like network. Like it don't you take what is that cliche quote that's like you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Like I am known for sliding in a DM, sending out like emails to and calling people. Like you never know, and don't take anything off the table. You might, if someone connects with you and you align in terms of like mindset or like goals or like the drive or things like that. It could be someone in a different field, but having those people in your
Yeah.
circle that are aligned with you is so important, so that when you are going through these moments, because entrepreneurship can be lonely, much like parenting, when you have that support and those people that are going through it as well, it just helps you kind of be able to bounce ideas off someone that gets it. And it also helps you tap into like other areas that you wouldn't even know. It might be someone who's further along or behind you, but like I've learned from all types of businesses, all type, like from different areas, different length of business, all of that. And I think being able to mosh them all together and kind of just like take and pull from everyone's experience has really helped me in my journey.
Yeah. So that's right. Creating a network and being a sponge is what I take out of
Yeah.
that, right? Like, and also, but being a sponge to the point where you take what serves you, right? And you can leave the rest. Like, you don't have to follow every, because I think that's also the inclination, right? Oh, this advice, this advice, this advice. And they're all like contradicting each other, right? But take the things that resonate with you, absorb them, right? Build that network of people who are supportive. Like, I'm 100% behind you on this one, right? Like, you never know who could support you or who you could support in their journey along the way. And
Hmm.
I think that's especially with everything with the pandemic getting online, Like we let go. I used to go to networking events all the time, right? But the networking now, at least the shift that I've seen is it's exactly that, the networking on alignment level, not just, oh, let's get a bunch of business women together in a room. Oh, and that already counts because they're women and they're in business. No, but what kind of a lifestyle do you have? What kind of a belief system do you have? What kind of, a view on life or on parenting? Like it doesn't always have to be the same. There's complementary, but when you click with someone and you're like, that person, I remember this. I met this girl who was 15 years younger than me, like randomly at a dance club, but she had the coolest mindset. She had gone through like 2 major injuries. She couldn't serve. She was like, I'm here to do this. And well, I'm going to make the best. And I was like, that mindset that she had, like, that was the thing, right, that resonated. So we actually exchanged details. Like now we're talking because she and I clicked on a mindset level, right? So it can just be on any of those. So I love that you bring that in, right? Network and yeah, networking and on alignment. Those are the main things. Okay. I feel like we could keep talking forever. I say this in like every interview that I go into. I'm like, we could just keep babbling and babbling and babbling. One take home from this interview that I have for us and how we've been talking is that how much process you can go through in a very short period of time, right? We tend to underestimate what we can do in a year or what the other way around, right? We tend to overestimate what we can do in a year and underestimate what we can do in 10. Right. And so if you look at how yourself in 2 years process, like, and we've been in touch for a while, like just pausing and recognizing the progress that you're making in your business, right? Like exactly back to the beginning when we were creating that consciousness, right? When you were talking about helping people write it down, that writing down those steps in your journey, right? Like seeing where you're struggling, seeing the progress, like measuring that along the way. I feel like that is such a beautiful thing to take out of this. Cause like, if I look at you, 2 years, if you look at all the things that you've gone through, all the process that you've gone through in those 2 years, it's freaking amazing. And I can't wait to see like where you are like another 2 years from now. So Danyale, thank you. I'm like, this is a good moment. This is a good moment. Thank you so much for coming on today and sharing all your beautiful knowledge and your care and your progress with us.
Thank you for having me. It's been great, as always. But yes, thanks for having me.
All right. Okay. Bye.
Bye.